Hello there, welcome to my messy basement. Today is April 17th, 2022. I'm David Yu and I want to show you how I put this very large print on the backing board. So here's the print and this is the board. The print already has glue on the back. So all I need to do is to spread the print, but it's a job that's really quite tricky. And I have to tell you, the first time I did this, I failed miserably. So I want to show you how I do this after learning from some costly experience. In the process, I'll also tell you something about where this and other prints are going to be displayed. So what I want to do, first of all, is to stick a couple inches onto the board. Then I'm going to just move along very slowly to make sure everything that the print sticks everywhere, and to make sure that there are no either air bubbles or wrinkles. So I'm going to fix this point right here. And another point on this side about, let's see here. I need to adjust a little bit. Okay, this looks good enough. One more. Try just to make sure it's right, properly positioned. Okay. So the next step is for me to turn this over like this, and I misplaced my scissors. Where are my scissors? And to see, the print itself has a backing paper that needs to be cut before the print can be put on the board. So what I want to do is to cut a couple inches of this backing paper off, so that I can properly position the beginning of the print. Alright, I'm ready to cut. It's going to be like this. Go to the other side to finish the job. Now I put the backing that remains back a little bit, like this. And then I'm ready to stick the print onto the board. The reason this job is a little complicated is that the print is so large. With two people, it's probably quite a bit easier, but I don't really have another person to help me. Besides, I'm so used to doing things myself even if there is another person, I do not necessarily prefer to have someone to help. Especially after I figured out I can do a pretty good job all by myself. So I'm going to use this piece of rag a lot to smooth things, to get rid of the bubble. Okay, now you can see the beginning is properly glued, so I can take this off, and that one. And what I do is to turn this whole thing over and begin to peel the paper backing off from behind, like this. Okay. Where did I put my here? This is the backing paper that I'm ready to gradually peel off. Now, while I do this, I better make sure that the exposed sticky part will get onto the board in a smooth fashion. That is, there's no wrinkles in particular and no air bubble. The way to do this is to go very slowly, like this. In a very, very deliberate, controlled way. I learned this the hard way. The first board I did, there were so many air bubbles, I ended up discarding that print and replace it with a new one. And these prints, by the way, are not cheap. Each one is something like $200. But expensive though they are, these are really good prints. This material is called wall flare. What it is a really vinyl with an adhesive in the back. The first print I ordered actually is called adhesive vinyl, but that adhesive is so sticky that it's very hard to work with. Before you know it, the print has stuck somewhere, and it becomes very hard for you to do anything about it. And that's why I changed to this type of product, and my experience tells me this is a much better choice. Okay, I'm just doing this little by little, making sure that already had a tiny bit of trouble here. Not so bad, I guess. To make sure that the print lies flat on the board. And I've learned again from experience that the key is to do this not just slowly, but alternating inside. Do one side a little bit, then move to the other side, so that basically the two sides goes up evenly, and there will be nothing, no troubling wrinkles emerging. This middle part is causing a little bit of trouble. I have to redo a tiny bit. It shouldn't be too bad, but we're still very close to that. Again, from experience, I've learned that the first feet or so is the most difficult. If you do that part right, the rest is just sort of a chore, a routine. You just do it one side at a time, and alternate, and you end up with a beautiful picture. And that's what I hope I'm going to be able to do today. Let me start talking a little bit about the exhibit. If you look at this print, you notice that it has both English and Chinese on it, and that is because this is an exhibit in America, of course, but dealing with what happened in China. More specifically, it deals with what happened in Beijing back in 1989. What did happen? Well, to tell a long story short, there were massive demonstrations in China, demonstrations calling for democratic changes. But the Chinese Communist government refused to yield, and in the end they decided it's better to just crack down on the demonstrations with all means necessary rather than to negotiate or to do the necessary changes themselves. So on June 4th of that year, 1989, actually the night of June 3rd, the government used tanks and machine guns to attack the demonstrators, especially those who refused to leave the Tiananmen Square or the central part of Beijing. And the result was hundreds of deaths, probably thousands, nobody knows, because the Chinese government has been ever since trying to erase that part of history, and they refuse to release any data. I assume they have good data, but they wouldn't release it. They wouldn't. Mentioning what happened in 1989 is considered a sort of a subversive act. It could get into real trouble. This is something that a lot of young Chinese people never heard of. But I live in America, and I sort of witnessed it. When this happened, I was already in the U.S., but I saw what happened on TV. I knew what happened. I knew the true story. And so this year, a very unusual opportunity arose, and that is there is a new museum in Washington, D.C., called the Victims of Communism Museum. And the museum offered to our group free use of their temporary gallery. It's a grand old room in a grand old building, and it's very rare to be able to find such a grand exhibition place in Washington, especially for free. So we've decided to accept the offer and produce hopefully a high quality exhibition of what happened in 1989 in Beijing. The exhibition would simply be called Tiananmen 1989, but it tells the whole story, starting with how Deng Xiaoping launched the economic reform back in the late 1970s, how he refused to expand the reform to the political realm, how that caused disaffection among the Chinese people, and how the people, especially the students at the beginning anyway, went on the street in April 1989 calling for political changes, and how the students were joined in the end by millions of the ordinary Chinese calling for the same thing. You know, Beijing had about 10 million people, counting those who lived in the suburbs. But some of the demonstrations in the center of Beijing were attended by over 1 million people. It's unheard of, not only in China, but I suppose elsewhere in the world as well. So that scared the communist government, who of course was not used to being challenged in any form. This is not right. So first they try to scare people, saying, if you don't leave, you'll have to face serious consequences. And the threats failed because the discontent among the Chinese people was so strong. They thought this is a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity to demand reform, democracy, freedom. They wouldn't just go home on hearing the threat. So the next thing the government did was to impose martial law. This was announced on May 19th of that fateful year, 1989. And that should have scared people off, because according to martial law, demonstration itself is a crime. You could be sent to prison for just doing that. But amazingly, it did not. It did not scare people off. Instead, hundreds of thousands of residents of Beijing went to major thoroughfares to block the soldiers from entering the city and imposing martial law. So since the announcement on May 19th until June the 3rd, in 2 weeks' time, the soldiers couldn't really enter the center of Beijing. Imagine that. So the communist rulers became more and more desperate. Finally, they decided, if we had to shoot our way in, we'll do that. Tiananmen Square being the epicenter of all these activities, and really the symbolic center of not only Beijing, but the whole country, the symbolic seat of political power, they decided they have to take it back at whatever cost. So they sent tanks and machine guns, soldiers with machine guns, and shot their way into Tiananmen Square. As I said, the students and residents were not scared off. Even when the tanks and machine guns came, quite a few of them decided to try to resist. Of course, you cannot resist a tank or to use rocks to fight the machine guns. So a lot of these brave souls got killed. How many? As I said, we don't know. But we know it's a lot, probably in the thousands. And that is known as the June 4th, 1989 massacre, or just June 4th massacre for short. And this particular exhibition board shows the scenes of the massacre. before going any further, let me describe our exhibit in Washington with a little more detail. As I said, we've got the use of this glorious exhibition space. On the walls of that room, there are 8 frames, and they are the only places where we are allowed to hang things. As I said, this is a historical building, and what that means is that we cannot put a single nail onto the wall ourselves. But in these 8 frames, there are hanging rails. So what we do is to produce 8 exhibition boards and hang them in those frames. And this is one of them. This is near the end of the storytelling. The board, the back of the board is 1/4-inch PVC. That is a very good material, a very light material, but it's not very strong. So I made a frame in the back of that PVC, both to strengthen the PVC board and to get a place to hang the board onto the railing in the frame. That was done some days ago. So today, my job is simpler. All I need to do is to hang these, to attach these prints onto the board already made. Besides these 8 exhibition boards, we will also have a short film that happened in 1989, and 4 display cases. The display cases will be used to display items, some items from some other years, but mostly items from 1989, like the pamphlets from the demonstrations, and outside of the display case would have flags from the demonstrations used by the students, and other artifacts. So we feel we are mounting a very good exhibition, and for those of you who are watching me doing this, I hope just by looking at this tour, you know we work very hard to make this happen. And this exhibition should open in early June, coinciding with the 33rd anniversary of the June 4th massacre in 1989. So after the opening ceremony, it should be free for anyone to come and visit and see these boards. And so you have my invitation to come. But going back to this particular board, you see there are some 5 pictures here. Let me very briefly tell you what these are. This picture shows a person who was killed by the martial law enforcement soldiers. And there's a group of Chinese looking at the body and chanting defiant slogans. This picture shows people sending the wounded to hospitals on the back of a tricycle. And that is because the ambulances were rare and also harder to navigate the streets. So a lot of bicycles that night were used as ambulances. And the picture below that shows a lot of bodies. It looks like a morgue, but it's not. It's just a spare room in a hospital in Beijing. Why not the morgue? Well, the reason is simple. Too many people died that fateful night. There was no room in the morgue. So these bodies, you can see, were really just piled up there waiting to be disposed. And this picture here shows some vehicles burning. Well, that's when the residents were so angry at the soldiers that they threw incendiary devices at their vehicles. So a lot of their vehicles were burned. And finally, this picture, I think you can see there's a row of tanks here, manned by a lot of soldiers. And this is Tiananmen Square. This is 3 days after the massacre. The army, the communist army, was victorious. Against whom? Against the Chinese citizens themselves. The citizens they're supposed to defend. Instead, they killed a whole lot of them. And you can see there's a row of ordinary citizens looking at the tanks from far away, I guess in a very somber, sad mood. So these are the 5 pictures on this particular board. As I said, we have 8 boards like this one, and they tell the whole story of what happened in 1989 in Beijing, in Tiananmen Square. And I think I've done a fairly good job putting this print onto this board. So I'm finished. Thank you for watching.